Jarrett, Chapter 12, America in World War II. I believe we have 62 vocabulary terms in this chapter. In this video, we'll cover them. We'll probably take 2 or 3 videos to cover them all, but we're going to cover them in as much depth and detail as possible. So let us begin. We begin with our first slide. The Washington Naval Conference is our first term. The conference took place in 1921. President Harding, again, one of the 3 Republican presidents of the 1920s. We discussed him in a previous chapter. He hosted this event in which leading world powers agreed to limit their navies. Now, again, this is a byproduct of World War I. When the Treaty of Versailles was signed by the bulk of the world powers who had participated in the war, we, the United States, did not join into that. And so this was an attempt by President Harding to limit the military buildup around the world. And as I said here, many leading world powers agreed to limit their navies as a way to limit aggression. Our next term, the Kellogg-Briand Peace Pact, signed by 62 nations around the world, renounced the use of war. Again, this is a short time, a few years after the end of World War I. World War I had cost well over 20 million dead, what would be billions upon billions upon billions of dollars of damage in today's dollars. And so the world was sick. The world was sick and tired of war. And so the idea was that these 62 nations renounced the use of war. They basically said that we think war is evil and we will never participate in it again. Of course, it doesn't always work that way. Our third term, the Good Neighbor Policy. This is something I think we have discussed previously. The U.S. agreed not to interfere, and I think this is a key thought right here, not to interfere in the international affairs of Latin America. Okay, so we agreed not to interfere in the international, the internal affairs, not international, but the internal affairs of Latin American nations, and the relations between those 2 groups improved. So when we agreed not to interfere in the internal affairs of Latin America, they and us, Latin America and the United States, our relationship between us and Latin American nations improved dramatically. The Russian Revolution of 1917. Again, you may ask, why are we looking at all these things that came as a result of the First World War or even during the First World War? Now, you got to keep in mind, the end of the First World War created the background for the Second World War. The events of the First World War paved the way for the Second World War. All right, I am back. I had to pause for a few moments. I had someone come in and to sign some papers. So let me go back and reiterate and make sure we all understand this. It was the end of the First World War, how poorly it ended with the Treaty of Versailles, the treatment of the German people and Germany as a whole, that paved the way for the development of the dictatorships, like in Germany with Hitler and the Nazis, that paved the way for the beginning of World War II. So what happened in World War I, what happened at the end of World War I, what happened after World War I, opened the door for World War II. So let's go back. We have the Russian Revolution, 1917. Communism overthrew the government of Russia and installed the world's first communist government. The leader of Russia, Tsar Nicholas, was taken out along with his whole family, put in front of a wall, and executed by the communists. They then, in turn, led by Vladimir Lenin and in the background Joseph Stalin, they created the world's first communist government. And again, communism is a political belief in the government ownership of everything. I mean, government owns the people, the land, the labor, the capital, blah, blah, blah. So again, communism is a political belief system in which the government owns and controls all power within the country. Our last term on this slide, Joseph Stalin, he seized power in Russia. And again, this is after the revolution of 1917. He seized power in Russia by eliminating his adversaries, and he established a brutal totalitarian dictatorship. So, essentially, he seized power by killing any and everyone who stood in his way. And the totalitarian government that he installed in Russia is arguably one of the most brutal in world history. It is said that upwards of 30 million Russians were killed by Stalin. No, not him personally, of course, but he, through his actions, he, through the orders given to his people, through the military, for example, that, let me rephrase it this way, upwards of 30 million people died as a result of the actions of Stalin while he was in power. And that's just Russians. That doesn't include the millions of people who died from countries that Stalin and the Soviet Union controlled. All right. The next term, our next slide, the German Nationalist Socialists, also known as Nazis. This is the group that seized power in Germany, of course, with the help of Adolf Hitler. Hitler joined the Nazi Party and was able to rise to the ranks of the Nazi Party. He became the Nazi leader, and eventually he, Adolf Hitler, as the leader of the Nazi Party, and the German Nationalist Socialists, also known, of course, as Nazis, they seized control over, forgive me, it's the wrong button there we go. They gained control over Germany after the Weimar Republic collapsed. Now, the Weimar Republic, this is the government that was installed in Germany after World War I ended. So let's go back and recap. So we have Adolf Hitler becoming a Nazi in the early 30s. He rises to a leadership position of the Nazi Party. Nazi Party is also known as the German National Socialists. Again, this is the official name of the Nazi Party. We just call them Nazis. And so Hitler rises in power within the Nazi Party. Eventually, he and the Nazi Party gain control over Germany after essentially the Weimar Republic is kicked out. Now, the Weimar Republic was the government set up by the winners, the Allies in World War I. The Weimar Republic was the government set up by the winners in Germany after World War I ended. So the Nazis, with Hitler in power, seized control of Germany in the early, mid-30s. Okay, let's go back to our second bullet on this page. We have Benito Mussolini, the Fascist Party. Mussolini developed a new political party known as the Fascist Party that was started by Mussolini. Okay, so Mussolini develops the Fascist Party, and the Fascist Party, led by Mussolini, seized control of Italy in 1932. So we have Mussolini, the Fascist Party, gaining control of Italy in 1932. So, in the early 30s, we have both Adolf Hitler, right here, and we have Benito Mussolini here, gaining power, dictatorial power, totalitarian power in Germany with Hitler and Italy with Mussolini. Okay, let's move on to our next bullet. Francisco Franco. He was a Spanish dictator. Again, he was a dictator of Spain. And a civil war began in Spain in the mid-30s or so to late 30s. And what we had was the Spanish dictator, Franco, was aided by the Axis powers. The Axis powers would once again be Italy with Mussolini, Germany with Hitler. They supported Franco and his side during the Spanish Civil War. And the good guys, the English, the French, Americans, supported the enemy of Franco in the Spanish Civil War. Now, again, why is this relevant? Well, it's not a huge war, but what happened in this particular war, which was not really very long in duration, is that some of the techniques, some of the new weapons that the Axis powers were developing, some of the new tools of war that the Axis powers were developing were used by Franco and the Spanish Civil War as a way to sort of test run them, to test drive them, to see if they were truly feasible in battle conditions. This again helps lead to World War II beginning. All right, our last one on this page, the League of Nations. The League of Nations was supposed to allow countries a place, a venue to talk about disputes. Unfortunately, it was too weak to resist the growth of totalitarian regimes. So here we have the League of Nations created as a result of the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I. One of the points that Woodrow Wilson pushed, one of his 14 points, really the only one that gained any traction, was the creation of a venue, a League of Nations, where countries could discuss any issues between themselves and another country, boundary disputes, trade disputes, it didn't really matter what it was. And then hopefully the League could then provide an avenue, a solution to those two countries' problems. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because the League was too weak. There really was no mechanism in place to force decisions made by the League upon the countries that had brought the dispute to the League's attention in the first place. And you could add in the fact that we, the United States, never joined, which of course weakened it. And because of this weakness, totalitarian regimes like Benito Mussolini in Italy and his fascist party, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in Germany. We're going to see Stalin. We've already seen Stalin in Russia. And, of course, you got Tojo in Japan. Because of that,